Good evening from Tel Aviv, where Israel has been under fire from Iranian drones and missiles through the day, shooting down the majority, but taking more civilian casualties too. The war has spread to Lebanon after Iran-backed Hezbollah fired rockets into northern Israel, with heavy bombing in Beirut. Tonight, hopes of a rapid end to the war are receding as the rhetoric and violence escalates on both sides. But what the truly achievable aims of the American-Israeli attacks are remain confused. The US speaks of destroying missile launchers and nuclear capability. Israel stresses regime change. But neither is considering an invasion to help what they believe is the true will of the Iranian people to topple the Islamic Republic. The chaos of the war has spread across the Gulf states and even to Cyprus. Kuwait said it accidentally shot down 3 American F-15 jets, all the pilots safely ejected, but a 4th US soldier injured at the weekend died. As oil prices shoot up, a Saudi oil refinery was also struck by Iranian fire. And is Britain now also at war, as it says it will shoot down Iranian attacks in defence of British interests? That's despite Trump saying he's very disappointed with Keir Starmer for not helping in the initial strike, and the PM standing his ground.
Any UK action must always have a lawful basis. It must also always have a viable and thought-through plan.
Iranian missiles and drones have been striking targets more than 2,000 miles apart, from Cyprus to Oman. The US President and his Secretary of War said their military operation was ahead of schedule. And whilst neither gave a time frame for its end, getting rid of Ayatollah Khamenei has come at a price for America and its allies, from downed jets and spiralling commodities prices to the deaths of civilians and soldiers. Tonight, we'll have teams reporting live from Beirut, Washington and London. First, our Foreign Affairs correspondent Secunda Kamani reports on the day's main events as the conflict in the Middle East escalates.
Tehran's skyline is a terrifying sight to behold. America and Israel can strike as and when they like, where they like. They're pounding bases and sites linked to Iran's ruling regime. But there's no doubt civilians are also amongst the more than 500 people reported killed so far. Here, patients being evacuated from a Tehran hospital damaged by a nearby blast last night.
Please feel free to sit.
Speaking today, President Trump gave no indication when the conflict might end.
We have the strongest and most powerful by far military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay, whatever it takes. Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that.
We aren't allowed inside Iran, so it's hard to accurately gauge public opinion. The many who oppose the regime sound scared, but still hopeful that change will come.
Today there were many airstrikes in Tehran. Moving around the city is risky. You have no idea where it can be. But I'm very happy that President Trump fulfilled his promises of helping the oppressed people of Iran.
Right now, the war is expanding. Today, Israeli strikes on Beirut. They followed missiles fired by Hezbollah into Israel. Residents of southern Lebanon have been fleeing their homes ahead of further Israeli attacks. Many in the country feel they're being dragged into a war they don't want to be part of. Israeli air defences are strong, but not impenetrable. This, an Iranian missile, striking a building in the city of Beersheba. In another strike yesterday that hit a synagogue in the centre of the country, 9 people were killed.
This building has been completely destroyed. That crater over there, that's where the shelter used to be. And amidst the debris, you can see religious books.
As they prepared to bury 2 of the victims this afternoon, sirens rang out warning of further missiles. Then they resumed mourning for mother and daughter, Sarah and Ranit Alimelech. The pain of losing a loved one is the same wherever you happen to be born. The grief here is raw, but Israelis are firmly supportive of this war, believing Iran's nuclear program to be an existential threat.
I think this is a just war. I hope this is the last time we have to pay this price. And it's so sad. We'll be there for the kids and the family as much as possible.
This conflict is reverberating across the region as Iran targets America's allies in the Gulf. Here, a US naval base in Bahrain struck by a missile. Saudi Arabia shut its biggest oil refinery following a drone strike, whilst Qatar has halted production of liquefied natural gas, spiking prices in both commodities. The risks to US troops underlined in this footage of an American F-15 plane crashing to the ground. Pilots of 3 fighter jets parachuted to safety.
You need something to help you?
Greeted by confused and friendly Kuwaitis.
Thank you for helping us.
After being mistakenly shot down by the country's air defences. For now, Iran's embattled regime is still in power. For them, just surviving will be a victory. Who will back down first? The country's clerics or President Trump?
And Sekunder's with me now. So what can we say about the impact of the decapitation of the Ayatollah on the Iranian regime now?
Well, look, Krishnan, the regime is sustaining unprecedented blows, not just the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei, but so many leadership figures. At the same time, the regime still, for the moment at least, is in control of the streets. It's still firing missiles here towards Israel and across the Gulf. I think, and that's something that we didn't see last year during the 12-day war, is it? And I think the reason behind it, Iran's strategy there is hoping that the Arab Gulf countries will pressure President Trump into trying to end this war sooner, that they'll think that the price that they're being made to pay, that the world is being made to pay, is not worth it. That's Iran's aim, I think. Will it work? We yet to see. Perhaps it will push those Arab Gulf countries further towards Israel and America's position. But in some ways, all of this, I think, can be traced back, at least in part, to the October 7th attacks and the ripple effects that we saw from that. And touching on Gaza, one last thing I want to point out is that as a consequence of this conflict, this renewed conflict, Israel has closed all crossings into Gaza. One of the largest aid groups that's operating there, the World Central Kitchen, have said that they only have enough food to last until the end of the week if those crossings remain closed.
For now, thank you. Well, earlier I spoke to the Israeli opposition leader and former Prime Minister Yair Lapid from the centrist Yesh Atid party. I caught up with him while he was visiting that site in Bet Shemesh, where 9 people were killed yesterday by an Iranian missile hitting the synagogue. What is your message to the families here who have lost their loved ones?
Well, the message is you fell victim to a vicious regime in Iran who is aiming at civilians. This is part of the difference. Israel is attacking military targets in Iran. Iran is attacking civilians here in Israel, trying to kill as many innocent people as possible. We stand strong together, and their sacrifice won't be in vain.
I mean, this was a war of choice. Do you think Israel is prepared to face more consequences like this?
I don't think this was a war of choice. I mean, the choice was to just wait for them to get enough ballistic missiles to shower Israel with them, or nuclear weapons to get rid of the entire state. So this is not a war of choice. The choice was either to wait for them to kill us or to go out there and make sure it will never happen. And the whole idea of the Israeli state is we are making sure it will never happen.
What do you believe the aim of this military action should be now?
Well, I would say the 2 immediate goals, which is getting rid of the ballistic missile program and getting rid of the nuclear program, and to make it possible, just to create the conditions for the people of Iran to determine their future and to get rid of this horrible regime in return for freedom and justice for all.
Isn't that asking them to face the guns of the IRGC? I mean, it's, you know, you're asking people to rise up when the other side have the weapons and they don't.
Well, we did so. I mean, the entire world was looking at admiration in January when those young people took to the streets just to make sure that they're, you know, fighting for their own freedom. So I think this is part of the duty of the civilized world to enable them to fight for the freedom. They did it even before the attack, and I'm sure they're going to try. We're still waiting to see if there's going to be an Iranian Mandela or Iranian Gandhi or Iranian Lech Walesa. But we think highly of their courage, and the entire global community admire this. And now we're enabling or creating the conditions for them to determine their own future.
And if this war helps Prime Minister Netanyahu be re-elected, you know, are you prepared for that?
You know what? I don't care about politics right now. We're fighting. This is an existential war and a just war. This is something that is so rare in the 21st century. A war with a moral clarity. This is a just war between good and evil, and we're all supportive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The former Prime Minister Yair Lapid talking to me earlier. Well, the fallout of the US-Israeli strikes is rippling across the Middle East. So what exactly is Donald Trump's plan now? As you heard in Sekunda's report earlier, when the president spoke at the White House, he talked about a campaign that could last 4 or 5 weeks. But his messaging has been mixed, to put it mildly. Our US editor, Anushka Astana, is in Washington. Anushka, what do you know?
Well, you would be forgiven for being confused on this. This is not normally how we hear from presidents after they have started a war. In his event earlier, the update on Iran lasted 7 minutes. Otherwise, he's been calling individual reporters with messaging that isn't always consistent. He told the Washington Post that this was all about the freedom of the Iranian people. He told Axios that if he can get a nuclear deal, this could be over within 2 or 3 days. Now we're hearing 4 to 5 weeks. Now, Donald Trump says he's willing to go further, but it is clear that the administration see this as a war that would last weeks rather than many months, and certainly not years, as we heard earlier this morning from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth.
To the media outlets and political left screaming endless wars, stop. This is not Iraq. This is not endless. This is the opposite. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission.
And when he said it's the opposite of Iraq, he was talking about a surgical operation. It's as if they see this as a bit like Venezuela on steroids, that you go in, you decapitate, and then the results will flow. Now, the decapitation is bigger than many people imagine, not just the supreme leader, but so many key figures, and many hope it will lead to regime change. But as you've been saying, there has been a chaotic response to this, an Iranian regime that is very determined to try to survive. And the risk for the White House is that this surgical operation has unleashed something they cannot control, less like Venezuela and more perhaps with echoes of Iraq, without a plan for what happens next.
Well, what happens in that case? Are they prepared to go along with an extended war that they can't bring an end to?
Well, it's interesting to hear their justification for this war. Donald Trump actually goes back 50 years in terms of Iranian action. Pete Hegseth earlier said, we didn't start this war. I'm sure that's not how it feels right now in the Middle East. In terms of are they willing to stay the course, there was something Donald Trump said earlier that suggested he was willing to. Have a listen.
Somebody actually said from the media, I think you'll get bored after about a week or two. No, we don't get bored. I never get bored. If I got bored, I wouldn't be standing here right now, I guarantee you that.
Within seconds of saying that, Donald Trump had changed the subject and was talking about the ballroom and the gold curtains he had picked up. It didn't sound like someone who was laser focused in his attention. And look, Donald Trump is under political pressure, first from Congress. Democrats are pushing for votes this week to restrain his powers. I've been messaging with some of them who say he has not made the justification for this war to voters, but also from his base. They are okay right now, but they definitely do not want a forever war from a president who always promised that wasn't what he would do.
Anushka Astana in Washington. Well, joining me now from Texas is the former US ambassador to Lebanon, David Satterfield. He was also the Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs during the first Trump administration. Thank you for joining us. Can Donald Trump control this war to within 4 or 5 weeks, or is it out of his control now?
All depends upon what the objectives of the campaign are and where the president decides he has made enough progress that he can declare victory. Look at the 3 different ambitions of the campaign. 2 of them are theoretically achievable, may already have been substantially advanced on. Further elimination, degradation, destruction of nuclear enrichment capacities, and then the diminution, destruction of the ballistic missile program, which means the critical machinery needed to produce the missiles, the launch sites themselves. The third objective, which is regime change, is a much more potentially quixotic one. The Iranian regime, in many ways, believes that it will survive this. They will not be destroyed, and that by the act of surviving, they win. That's all they have to do, and that ultimately they can apply enough pressure using drones, using other systems on the Gulf states and on the U.S. markets, where the price of gas in a midterm election year will be a sensitive issue, on the president to bring this to a close. Do all these factors come together and lead the president to decide he's won, enough is enough? Or does this go in a direction which spirals into something that, in the end of the day, he cannot present as the clear-cut victory that he clearly wants?
And people's memories of Iraq are still very fresh. I mean, isn't it possible that there are what we used to call unknown unknowns?
This is different from Iraq, and I would not draw parallels either to Afghanistan, Iraq, or Libya. Not with respect to the degradation of critical threatening systems. Look, Iran is, now, was a direct threat, strategic threat to all of its neighbors, to the region as a whole and beyond. There are ways which are being pursued right now to diminish those threats. But can you change the character of Iran? I do not believe that you will see a massive ground force, civilian or military, as in Afghanistan or Iraq, attempting to create at U.S. hands a different state. The expectation, and here look at the president's own words. He is given a chance, he said, to the people of Iran to act. Let's see if they do it.
Well, isn't that very unrealistic, given the fact that the IRGC and the security apparatus are still in place? I mean, are people just supposed to take them all on?
Well, the answer is, and it's not for me to prescribe for the people of Iran their actions, but if we were to assume that no people anywhere were ever capable, by simply massing and willing to sacrifice, to overcome an oppressive regime, where would the history of the world have been over the course of much of the last 200 years? So no, I don't dismiss it out of hand. Is it extraordinarily difficult? Yes, it is.
I mean, the British Prime Minister has suggested you don't achieve regime change with airstrikes. Is he wrong?
There is no successful demonstration of external standoff efforts promoting regime change in a security state of the character of Iran.
David Satterfield, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has fractured Iran's leadership, with a temporary council of clerics and the Revolutionary Guard still in control. While the US has called for the Iranian people to take over their country, civilians face well-armed security forces, as we were just discussing, that have already used lethal force to suppress uprisings earlier this year. Jonathan Rugban reports.
Donald Trump says this air campaign could last 4 to 5 weeks. In reality, he's in a race against time. either to overthrow Iran's government or to force its surviving leadership into some kind of deal with the United States, ending this conflict before global energy prices spiral out of control. Airstrikes have destroyed the police headquarters in this district of Tehran. One big question is whether this inspires the popular uprising Mr. Trump has called for, or whether Iran's 47-year-old revolution not only survives, but in doing so becomes even more hardline. In the southern city of Galedan, protesters have celebrated the death of their supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. "Am I dreaming this? Hello, new world," a man is heard shouting. These young Iranians should be in the vanguard of any second revolution. But how many would dare mount an uprising without weapons? Thousands were killed during demonstrations in January. And even if they do rise up, Mr. Trump has so far refused to say if or how he will defend them. While most of Iran's leadership is in hiding, this Ayatollah, one of 3 interim leaders, has spoken to his people.
By God's grace, once again the Iranian nation will pass through these hardships. We will taste the sweet nectar of victory and conquer lofty peaks. We are facing an intense and difficult time. By God's grace, we will overcome this danger.
Iran is probably being run by this man, Ali Larijani, not a cleric but a long-serving official. Today, he ruled out negotiating with the Americans, claiming that Iran has prepared itself for a long war. On Saturday, a school next to a naval base was bombed. It was the first day of Iran's working week. School books and bags were covered in blood and ashes, and at least 100 people were reported killed. It's believed to be the deadliest attack so far, and a reminder of the risks any air campaign faces. More civilians were reported killed here in Tehran, though the target was believed to be a Revolutionary Guard post. Donald Trump claims this bombing campaign is ahead of schedule, but he cannot control everything he and the Israelis have unleashed here. And US intelligence officials are reported to be highly doubtful that Iran's government will be toppled any time soon.
So now the Ayatollah and other senior Iranian figures are dead. Where does this leave the regime? Kieran Jenkins has this.
Well, President Trump has said he wants Iran to play out like Venezuela, where America took out the leader and dealt with his deputy. But Iran is very different. The killing of Khamenei and other senior figures has not toppled the regime, which has dense structures embedded over 4 decades. As well as the supreme leader, there's the Iranian president, who is still alive. And while Iran has elections where voters choose a president and a parliament and an assembly of experts, who we'll come back to, in reality, power is held by a small clerical elite. The supreme leader sits at the top of that elite. He appointed not only the head of the judiciary, but also half of the influential Guardian Council of 12 clerics and lawyers, which upholds the Islamic system. They veto laws and tightly control who can even run for elections, including elections for that assembly of experts, the 88 Shiite clerics who will choose the next supreme leader and are very much regime loyalists. Now, there's also the Revolutionary Guard, set up 40 years ago as a parallel force, really, to the military, and are arguably more powerful than the military itself, set up to expressly defend Iran's Islamic system. Under the Revolutionary Guard, there's the Basij militia. They're a vast volunteer paramilitary organisation with an extremely tight grip on Iranian society, shutting down protest and enforcing Islamic rule. Now, these institutions are living on. In theory, Iran's now being run by a 3-person interim council of the president, Masoud Pezeshkian, along with the head of the judiciary and a member of the Guardian Council, with other powerful figures heavily involved behind the scenes. So The Supreme Leader's death, hugely significant, of course, but so are the structures that he entrenched and which have outlived him. Krish.
Well, earlier I spoke to Fouad Izzadi, who is a professor of political studies at Tehran University and a supporter of the Iranian government. And I began by asking him who was now calling the shots in Iran.
If the leader of the country is not able to perform his duties, the Constitution dictates that a committee of 3 people should be formed. The 3 people are the country's president, the head of judiciary, and a member of the Guardian Council. And this committee, when the leader is not available, are going to function as the commander-in-chief. So they are in charge of Iran's military. They are doing other jobs that under Iran's constitution, the leader is supposed to perform.
The Americans say that this campaign, from their point of view, is way ahead of schedule and that they have taken out many senior figures in Iran. Is time up for the Islamic Revolution?
These are pipe dreams. These are Netanyahu's talking points. He has been trying to overthrow the Iranian government for many years. He thinks he can do it using American soldiers now. It's unfortunate that Trump, instead of doing America first, is doing Israel first. He made a huge mistake. This is the biggest mistake of his life. I'm sorry, let me correct that. This is the second biggest mistake of his life. The first big mistake was being a friend of Epstein.
Trump has said he said many things, but one of the things he said is that he is prepared to talk. What do you think the leaders want to talk about?
You know, United States attacked Iran in the middle of negotiations in June, and they did it again this week. So whenever Iranian leaders hear Trump says he wants to talk, they become very worried about the next military plans that Trump has. It's very understandable. If you want to change a government, you don't enter a diplomatic agreement with the government that you want to change. He said he wants to change Iran's government. Netanyahu said the same thing. Foolish policies. They're not going to be able to do that. These are criminal people.
Before he was killed, the Ayatollah warned that this time the response would be overwhelming and massive, or words to that effect. Why has the response been so measured?
Iran is facing 2 criminal nuclear states. Iran is hitting U.S. bases that are available in this neighborhood. What is happening is that although Iran is a weaker country in terms of military might, the Iranian soldiers are fighting for Iran. American soldiers are fighting for Israel. This is the difference.
I mean, Iran is aiming at US military bases in the Gulf, but it is hitting civilian targets. It's hitting homes and airports and hotels. And we've seen the evidence for that.
Yes.
Either that means your military is not good enough, or it means that your targeting is wrong.
Or it means that the United States evacuated the bases and they were putting these soldiers in hotel rooms. They emptied the hotel so they could bring American soldiers, and that is legitimate military target. Iran has hit CIA headquarters in all these Persian Gulf countries. That is legitimate military.
Are you saying the hotels were targeted on purpose?
Because they were housing American soldiers. If they were housing American soldiers, they were hit on purpose. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Now Trump says this will go on for weeks. How long do you think it will go on?
He has started the war, and he can end the war today. He's realizing, he was expecting a regime government, the change of Iranian government on the first night. This is how foolish he is. And I don't know if he has the stomach to continue. The people in the US Congress know who Trump is. It would be foolish for them to let this man use US military to advance Netanyahu's goals.
Fouad Izzadi, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Take care.
Well, as we've been hearing, a new front opened in the conflict after Hezbollah in Lebanon targeted Israel's military base in Haifa with rockets and drones, and Israel responding with its jets bombing the suburbs of Beirut, killing 31 people. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, is in Beirut. Lindsay.
Christian, it's pretty quiet on the streets of Beirut tonight because people, of course, have seen this before. They lived through a terrible war just 16 months ago. Now, Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy, fired 6 rockets into Israel overnight, and the result was a far greater barrage back. Now, what the Israelis are saying is that they have hit Hezbollah targets. Those are partly in the southern towns right on the border with Israel, but also in the southern suburbs of Beirut, which are still controlled by Hezbollah, even though Hezbollah is much weaker than it used to be. The Israelis say that they're hitting the financiers. They say they've hit some Iranians. They've killed some Iranians who work for Hezbollah. Now, the people of Lebanon, particularly those who live in those southern suburbs, once again, they're on the move. There were cars pouring out of the town of Sidon, and I'm told they're still pouring out. And just as we were arriving a couple of hours ago, there were more attacks. The Israelis hitting here in Beirut again. So this is a very active front in this widening war.
So if the war is spreading, what are the unintended consequences?
Well, I think the unintended consequences are that it's destabilizing the whole region. And we know what President Trump likes. He likes what they called in Venezuela one and done, that you have one attack and then you take out the top person and it's all done in his view. But this is a war that is getting more complex by the day, and it's destabilizing the Gulf region. Now, the Gulf region, of course, is renowned for its prosperity. It's just a place where people go and live because they like the sunshine, and they like it because it's tax-free. And this region is now suffering enormous economic problems, as well as the problems of the destruction and the danger to life and limb. And it is absolutely not clear where this is going to end. President Trump has not actually said what his strategy is. We don't really quite know what he's trying to achieve, but what he is doing is destabilizing this whole region.
Lindsay Hilson in Beirut, Lebanon. Now, in Britain, Sir Keir Starmer told MPs that he does not believe in regime change from the skies. But after angering Donald Trump by telling him the UK would not take part in the military offensive against Iran, the Prime Minister said that he would allow US planes to use UK bases for defensive missions. And he said rapid deployment teams were being sent to the Gulf to support British nationals sheltering there. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
The Prime Minister's late-night announcement that the US could now use RAF Fairford and Diego Garcia for bombing attacks on Iranian missile launchers didn't get him any public thanks. President Trump said he was very disappointed with the UK reaction to the initial bombing of Iran, and Keir Starmer took far too long responding. His Defence Secretary also piled in.
As we've said since the beginning, capable partners are good partners. Unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing about the use of force.
He and his boss won't have liked Keir Starmer's words in the Commons, where he sounded like a man who thought Operation Epic Fury might be an epic mistake.
This government does not believe in regime change from the skies. The lessons of history have taught us that it is important when we make decisions like this that we establish there is a lawful basis for what the United Kingdom is doing. That is one of the lessons from Iraq. And that there's a viable, thought-through plan with an objective that can be achieved.
Non-essential personnel leaving RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. 2 drones were intercepted heading for the base this morning following one hit at midnight. The Prime Minister said the US would not be using this base. From some Labour opponents of the Iraq war, a guarded welcome for Keir Starmer's response to US action now.
Can I commend my right honourable friend for his resolute stand? It can't have been easy to stand up to the President and not get dragged into this war that has no apparent end plan.
The Prime Minister's right. There needs to be a plan. Has the US President shared with him or consulted with him on what the plan is? Because from our experience, we know it's easy for politicians to start the war and fire the weapons. It's when the shooting ends, the nightmare begins.
Yes, exactly. Others chorused their approval, adjusting to the sound of a Prime Minister singing their tune.
Can I thank him? And he's right to urge caution.
It wasn't enough for the Green Party leader, bringing his by-election victor to Parliament.
The majority of people in this country do not want our UK bases to be used by US military. And the only reason why this is happening is Keir Starmer is incapable of standing up to Donald Trump.
Keir Starmer said US use of British bases would be limited to specific bombing missions, like attacks on Iranian missile launchers. That was justified by international law on collective defence, he said, and it was much needed by allies in the Middle East. The Foreign Office estimates 300,000 British citizens could be in the region, and they include many who were trapped as they changed flights crossing the world and are now grounded, not knowing when flights will resume.
I'm very apprehensive. I do want to come home or go on to Australia. And I don't know what's happening. Just hope the airport opens soon.
Friday, across the Gulf from Iran, Dubai, the busiest international passenger airport in the world. Doha, the 10th busiest. This was air traffic just before the attack. The skies swarmed with civilian airliners. 2 days later, the skies are virtually empty. A few airliners skirting around the region, most keeping completely clear of it. At Heathrow this afternoon, an empty concourse, normally packed with passengers for the Middle East. Some in government already forecasting the economic hit they fear will follow disrupted trade, travel and rising oil prices. It's only just over a year ago or so that Keir Starmer moved into full bromance form with Donald Trump. It was called a love-in, that White House meeting, and after that, so many episodes when Keir Starmer bit his tongue over the Chagos Islands, over Greenland, over tariffs. Something seemed to change today. And although he didn't say it in the most offensive, stark way that he could, it was perfectly clear what Keir Starmer was saying to Donald Trump, to the world. The plan that you are, the military action that you are effecting at the moment in Iran is illegal and is not founded on a proper plan. We've been told over the years that we will see post-Brexit, maybe, certainly post-Trump, Britain moving closer to Europe, more distant from America. If that book is ever written, this could be a serious paragraph inside it. One of the other phenomenon that we saw today was the left of the Labour Party in the slightly unfamiliar position of approving of what a Labour Prime Minister says about US military action. They haven't been able to coo, as you heard them there, and chorus in the way that they did today for quite a long time. And it was quite telling as well. This happens at a moment when Keir Starmer needs as much support as he can find inside the Labour Party, but he also looked more comfortable. The human rights lawyer of old, he looked more comfortable than he does with some of the lines he's been reading out in more recent times.
Gary Gibbon in Westminster. Well, earlier I spoke to the Defence Minister Al Kans, and I asked him, after Keir Starmer's words today, whether Britain could now say whether the US attack on Iran was legal or not.
So the UK has been really clear. Today, we are supporting the US. We're supporting our British interests in the region and working exceptionally hard in the midst of a crisis, and we've been working all weekend to protect the hundreds of thousands of British citizens that are stuck in the Middle East. That defensive line
but what about the legality of the attack?
In place is really, really important. And let's just be really clear on this. In no way, shape or form am I a fan of the regime. It's been supporting terrorists across the region, as you will know where you are at the moment, for the last 30 years. But we've got to be really clear. If we're going to put our armed forces in harm's way, we are not going to repeat the same mistakes as 2003, and we're going to have a proper legal framework, carefully crafted and well thought through, before we employ any armed forces.
Okay, well, people will have seen you, and will probably judge that you don't want to answer the question on legality over the original attack. But let's talk about where we are now.
So I'm not going to comment on an American analysis of the law. That's
clearly
not my job. My job is to comment on the British analysis of a legal perspective of involving British troops in that situation. And what I can say is, as of today, right now while we're talking, we have fast jets with pilots flying all over the area, identifying, tracking, mapping, and destroying targets should they hit British interests or indeed British citizens in the Middle East. And I think that's fair.
So how are we not now at war with Iran if we are prepared to destroy Iranian military assets, which could include planes flown by pilots?
So any drone, any plane, any missile that poses a threat to our interests and encroaches on the defensive line will be identified, tracked and struck, whether by us, the Americans, any of the Middle Eastern countries, their defence assets. That's the reality of conflict, and we've got to protect our British citizens. And I'm not going to make any apology for protecting them.
No, but the reality is that we have now been drawn into this war on one side.
No, we are protecting our British interests and citizens within the Middle East or far and beyond. And if anybody threatens British interests or civilians, we need to be absolutely clear that we will protect them, and we won't make any apologies for that.
And has there been an assessment of what the consequences of being drawn into this war could be in terms of the terror threat, which we know is already very high?
So I think we've got to be really clear on what drawn into a war means. The Prime Minister has been really clear that we are in a defensive posture, and any threat that emanates from Iran that threatens our British interests, or importantly, the hundreds of thousands of citizens in the Middle East, we will neutralise that threat. And we won't make any apologies for it.
And so what about the relationship with the Trump administration now? Because they've been very critical, not just of Britain's decisions, but also about the Chagos Islands handover today as well. I mean, it sounds like our relationship is in a new low.
So I'd be really clear that the US, and I've fought alongside them for 24 years of my military career, are our number one security partner and ally. But when there are differences, whether it be intelligence sharing to legal approaches to operations, we make our case very clearly. And we are an independent country with our own view, and we'll make our decisions as required. We won't be pushed into any decision that we don't necessarily agree with. We've got to avoid the 2003 scenario, and we've got to ensure we rebuild trust with the population as to when, where and why we use military force.
And can I just finally ask you about the evacuation of British citizens from the Gulf? Are you looking at using the military for that?
Yeah, so we won't talk through any plans, but what I can say is we are working very hard to ensure any citizens that want to get out of the Middle East across a plethora of countries that have now been struck by Iran, that there are facilities and capabilities to do so. And I do know, and I recognise as well, that you're sat in Tel Aviv, which has received multiple incoming rockets and missiles. And so, I would say to anybody out there, please follow the FCDO advice, and we're working our very best to come up with a balanced, collective plan to get you back home, should you wish to do so.
Alcaz, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, and stay safe.